You know, at one point during the season, someone said Oregon will never win a national championship.
I know who that person was, and it wasn't Andrew Callista.
SEC, SEC, SEC.
Why did you say that?
ESPN told me I had to root for him.
Blue White Tailgate's next. And we welcome everyone to Blue White Tailgate. Great to have you with us. Steve, Trey, Andrew. I'm not in the center because it's in the Callista contract that we have to be separated by a chair. Don't quite understand that. It's great to see you again. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Steve. Happy New Year, Andrew.
Happy New Year, guys.
All
Every
right.
time I'm on here, fighting words right off the start.
Because you deserve it.
All the time.
You deserve it.
All right. National championship game ended up being one that the Big Ten is going to be able to stick its chest out about for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that finally, they get the monkey off their back. Ohio State clearly was the best team over the last 4 weeks of the season, and they really took it to Oregon. It didn't really surprise me, actually.
Every time Ohio State wanted to run the ball, Ezekiel Elliott sent a message. He finishes runs. And Cardale Jones, I mean, yes, the Jamarcus Russell comparisons, but every time they needed a yard, they went to him. He put his head down. He got the yard, kept possession of the ball, which is key against Oregon.
There's no question about that. The other part, too, is that on New Year's Day, the New Year's Day games, the Big Ten ended up going 3-1. They picked up wins. Michigan State, they beat Baylor.
Yes.
And also Wisconsin won by beating Auburn. I mean, so the Big Ten not only did this, but then you add in what Penn State and Rutgers did. They ended up 6-5, and they were underdogs in all 11 games.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that it's interesting because Ohio State was a 7-point underdog to Oregon in the national championship game. So whoever's in Vegas setting the lines are obviously have to adjust that. But I think that the Big Ten represented themselves well. I think you're going to see bigger and better things with the coaching changes this year. I think that not that the Big Ten was going anywhere or has been anywhere, but I think that the Big Ten is ready to go.
Yeah, I think that there's been a perception, guys, that after week 2. And week 2 was a disastrous week for the Big Ten. Here was the chasm between Big Ten and SEC. Big Ten here, SEC here. This after week 2. I think now it's like this. I think there's a depth of teams in the SEC. You have to really respect the quality and depth. But I think now it's really closed. I mean, you guys agree, disagree?
No, I agree, and I know I just chanted SEC, SEC. I have tremendous amount of respect for the SEC. There are many good programs throughout from the top to the bottom of that conference. But when you're so overburdened with the national media just constantly hyping it, at one point on the Big Ten Network and Big Ten and beyond, they talked about they asked Glenn Mason, are the 4 best teams ever assembled in a single division in college football right now in the SEC? Those teams didn't win a game in bowl season. I mean, and then the Big East, or the Big Ten East, goes 4-1.
Big 12 went 2-5. Pac-12, to its credit, had a good bowl season. They went 7-3 despite Oregon's loss in the championship game. But here's another part, too. Let's discuss this for a second. The final weekend of the regular season, you had Georgia Tech defeat Georgia, Clemson defeat South Carolina, Florida State beat Florida, and Louisville beat Kentucky. The conventional wisdom out of that you heard from people was, well, that's the SEC East. That's the weaker division. Okay. So now we get to New Year's Day. Mississippi State loses to Georgia Tech. Ole Miss gets crushed by TCU. Auburn loses to Wisconsin. Alabama loses to Ohio State. That's the SEC West that went 0-4 right there. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the SEC, there's so much been talking about them for the last 8-10 years, certainly in the BCS era. And the fact is that they can only go down. I mean, if you would hear like the conventional wisdom from the talking heads is that the SEC schools will, beat half the teams in, in the NFL. And
Right.
it's just not, it's really not, it's not fair to them. They're not bringing it upon themselves. I mean, the media has made such a big deal about them doing as well as they have or whatever. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you got a bunch of 19, 20, 21-year-old kids getting coached by guys in there trying to do the best they can, and they have no control of the media.
Let's not forget, LSU also lost to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, you could say, was a tire fire at the end of the season with the quarterback situation that they had, and they had a lot of struggles down the stretch. And LSU is one of those, SEC West power teams that did knock off Wisconsin, Steve, in that Week 2 disaster that you talked about for the Big Ten.
Right, but there's another part to it too. I think what the closing of the gap has happened. The SEC still is outstanding. It's just now it's shown that now we've seen a full body of work. The Big Ten has shown that they have athletes that can compete, and that's the big part of it. Everybody gets 25. It's not as if the SEC has 50 guys per recruiting class and everybody else has 25.
Well, I mean,
Depending
on who's recruiting or not. I mean, it is the SEC, and they all cheat, so it doesn't really matter.
And by the way, the Big Ten East is the one that really did the damage in this thing. They were 5-1, including the 2 Ohio State wins. It was the Big Ten West, though, that went 1-4. There's been a lot of turnover in the Big Ten West, which we're going to talk about. Turnover is something that's going to be very important that we're going to discuss coming up, because the Big Ten East became even more intriguing. The Big Ten West a little bit more chaotic. That and more as we continue on the Blue White Tailgate Show after this. Welcome back. Well, the Pinstripe Bowl, Penn State won. Oh, there's a surprise. Since Penn State has entered the Big Ten, Penn State and Ohio State are tied for the most wins at 11. In fact, going into the Pinstripe Bowl, Penn State is the only Big Ten team in double-digit wins in the conference in bowl games. They then won to get to 11. Then Wisconsin won to get to 10. Ohio State won 2 to go from 9 to 11. But Penn State continues to do its part. Your thoughts on what we saw in New York?
Well, I think what you saw is a team that really came together. I mean, they faced a lot of adversity this year with the reductions in the scholarships. I think that the coaching staff did a phenomenal job. I think they've kind of dovetailed off of what Bill O'Brien has done and to keeping the program, kind of afloat during a very difficult time. The Joe Paterno era, obviously my era, I think that, we always played well in bowl games because they were very, very prepared, well prepared. Well coached, and this was no different this year.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I thought they were very well prepared. I also thought they did a brilliant job this season of doing a lot with less. And they had to be clever to do a lot with less because they were in a spot like that. Your thoughts, Andrew?
You guys weren't impressed with Sam Ficken? I got to show my boy some love. I mean, come on. 44-yard field goal on that surface that was all chewed up. Yeah. It was sloppy. That's a great kick. But in all seriousness, I was impressed with how they came out in the fourth quarter. The pass from Christian Hackenberg to Deshaun Hamilton, who was playing with a bum hamstring, there was very little window, and he zipped that in right after a personal foul where you thought Penn State just took a step forward with the Akil Lynch run, and it was 2 steps backwards. One play later, he was able to answer the call and put the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, and Penn State outscored them 24-6 after falling behind 21-7. I mean, they were the better team down the stretch. And that's what you want to see. You want to see teams play their best football at the end of the year. That tells you something about coaching and about the program. We saw that in Penn State. They won 3 of their last 5 games. And we saw that across the Big Ten in that previous segment. Big Ten teams played their best football at the end.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of like the talent will rise to the top. And it's the same thing with coaching. I mean, the great coaches always coach great at the end of the year. It's like it's kind of like they have to get their feet underneath them as far as the season's concerned, personnel decisions, and I think that you saw that the Big Ten, did a great job. I think in the bowl season.
Right, now here's the next part. Penn State will get 5 early entries. 3 of them are recruited, signed players. Paris Palmer, the junior college transfer tackle, Sterling Jenkins, and the quarterback Tommy Stevens out of Indianapolis. Andrew, your thoughts on getting them in early?
Well, with Michael Connor transferring, you needed to take a quarterback this year, and Tommy Stevens, he's a good quarterback. He was committed to Indiana, so that's a big get for Coach Franklin as well. But just ask the guy sitting next to me about big offensive linemen. Paris Palmer, he's a JUCO out of Lackawanna County Community College. That's a big get. He's from South Carolina, right outside of Columbia, was a South Carolina commit actually at one point, and then Sterling Jenkins dominate the state, dominate the region mentality. He's a good offensive lineman from Western PA. Both have great size, physicality to their games. And Trey, you know as well as anybody that those big tackles, guards coming at linebackers and everything in a big physical Big Ten will pay dividends at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that the game has changed so much, certainly from the 80s when I played. Just to give you an example, when I played, we had one guy that was 300 pounds on our team, the 1986 National Championship team. Right now, I think Penn State's got 14. I mean, it's a completely different animal. So the fact is you've got big athletic guys that can move their feet. I think that Penn State is really poised to do some great things in the next few years.
Bob Shoop did an outstanding job this year. There were certainly overtures from LSU, but in the end, he really wasn't that, he wanted to stay here. James Franklin understands loyalty and staff stability. How important is that in today's game moving forward, staff stability? Because you live staff stability.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. The fact is Bob is going to get his chance. I mean, the guys that he has assembled and his staff are all going to get an opportunity at some point. But to keep them together for 3 or 4 or 5 years, I think is important. And I think it's going to be really good for them to stay at a program so they can really take Penn State to where Penn State should be.
Okay, Deion Barnes, Donovan Smith, Jesse James declare for the draft. Your thoughts, Andrew?
Steve, talking before the show, I agree with you. I think Jesse James will project well at the next level once he does some tests and at the combine and things like that. The Deion Barnes and Donovan Smith, I just flat out think they could have used another year, whether they want to be here or they thought it was a financial situation to move on. I just think they would have benefited, especially Deion Barnes, because he did have the down year last year, played the run better this year, but I still think he could have used another year of at least somewhere.
Yeah, but we'll see how it plays out for them. They've made their decision. They do have their degrees to their credit, so at least that part is in the books. Coming up, we miss Todd Sadowski. Andrew is sitting in the chair.
The chair.
The chair. So we can't do the show without him. Todd's next here on White Tailgate.
We just appreciate you sticking by us. It's been a crazy ride, but it all came through, and we got this win in overtime today. The program's going in the right direction.
Welcome back. Steve, Trey in studio. We can't do the show without our bud Todd Sadowski. Todd, Happy New Year from us to you, my friend.
Yes, Happy New Year, fellas. Glad to be part of the program today.
It's great to have you with us. All right, you watched the Pinstripe Bowl play out, Todd. In the end, what were your thoughts on what you saw, especially with the program moving forward?
What a group! What a great group of guys, and just what a fun season from start to finish. The way they went about it. I mean, definitely a roller coaster ride, but you just love the fact the way that these guys stick together. We all knew, we talked about it all season long, how 2014 was going to be really, really difficult, and the lack of depth, just really showed itself during the middle of the season. But at times they really needed to gut things out. This team shows so much character. When you look at what Ohio State just did, and you think about that game at Beaver Stadium, that this Nittany Lions group took them to overtime, and then to start the year in Ireland, to finish the year in the Bronx, I mean, it was awesome. What a way to finish.
It is. I mean, it was a very interesting season, and I think it was really important that Penn State came out with that win. Getting back to the depth, and we were talking earlier on the show about the guys that are going to declare for the draft. I mean, those are 3 really good players, and it's not that we have an abundance or an overabundance of those quality type players. How do you think that's going to affect the team for 2015, Todd?
Well, I think Donovan Smith's the one that's going to affect it the most. I mean, you look at that line. Every week we talk about, okay, line play. When are you going to get Miles and Donovan together on that left side of the line? And then for him to declare, and you think, all right, well, we're going to have him as the anchor of that huddle and the offensive line coming back. But, yeah, look, you can't blame him. If he's getting information, he's going to get taken, and he wants to get paid to play and play on Sundays. He's going to do his thing. The other guys are definitely going to have an impact, but I think, coming off that offensive line, I think Donovan's loss is going to be felt the most.
Todd, I'm up in the booth, so I've got that wide view of things. You're on the field when you cover games. Give me your perspective as to how, especially in the fourth quarter of games, the kind of conditioning that you saw on the field from Penn State and what Dwight Galt's program you felt meant? Because you had a much better view based on what I did because you were right down there with them.
Well, Steve, it showed itself immediately. I thought it really showed itself at media day. When they came out of summer workouts, you could see a difference in a lot of the guys, whether they were a little bit more cut, whether they were just a little bit wider. I mean, they just looked really fit and ready to go. When we talk about what the team had to put onto the field from a skill set and a depth perspective, the fourth quarter became so important for these guys to be in condition, not only because they're being asked to play more snaps and more plays out on the field, but just because, that to compete, that's what you have to do and to get to that level. So for these guys to do what they did in some of the fourth quarter performances, it is definitely a direct result of a great conditioning program. And look, that's just the first year. I mean, they really didn't even get the complete year yet. And to think that the guys that are coming in, they got some guys that are signed up for early enrollment, it's really exciting to think about where it's going to go from here. But no doubt, I mean, you don't have to see it from the sidelines. Like you said, you saw it up top. It's definitely a big impact.
Todd, what do you think the season is going to look like in 2015, and what's your prediction for Penn State's season in 2015?
Well, I don't see a lot of great competition, non-conference, and as good as a bowl season as the Big Ten had, there's plenty of games to be had on that schedule. The one thing that I really like, Trey, about what happened in the Penn Bowl is you saw the Christian Hackenberg we all want to see. And I think that to end on a really good positive note for him was really, really important. And for the receivers to go into that offseason knowing that the work they put in, those 3 weeks of work they put in for the bowl game paid off, and that they got direct results from it. And that I think that's really going to, parlay itself into just a good start to the season next year and a good record to get going. And, hopefully they can avoid any kind of long losing streaks. But I'm looking at 8-9 wins for Penn State. Some of these young guys are really going to need to get going and step in. But look, the Buckeyes showed you don't have to be an upperclassman to get in there and get involved and make a big difference. So the kind of recruiting class they're bringing in, the kind of guys that are going to be coming back, the way the program is moving, the direction they're going, I see really positive things for 2015.
Got about 15, 20 seconds, Todd. So in 15, 20 seconds, couple positions you want to look at in the spring.
Ooh, how about linebacker? Oh, we're going to miss Mike Hall, that's for sure. And the defensive line. Look, we got a lot of talent up front, defensive line-wise. Those guys are going to get a lot of rotation. I still think our front part of our defense is going to be real solid. Of course, the secondary made big strides. So I look defensively. I'm going to be watching a lot of what's going on the defensive side, guys.
It is always great, my friend. It's great to hear your voice.
Yep, look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks a lot.
Todd Sadowski. We'll go back. Wrap it up in a moment after the White Tailgate. Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Our final segment of the show. Our thanks to Todd Sadowski for being on with us in the previous segment. So we have this group back. All right, coaching hires in the Big Ten. A lot of things have changed. I think the last thing anybody expected was Gary Anderson to leave Wisconsin. He's only there 2 years. And they decided to get Paul Chryst. That really is not a surprising hire. All right. Then you have, out of nowhere, we all know Bo Pelini was in trouble. But then they bring Mike Riley in. That surprised everybody. And then Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Your thoughts about the hires in the conference?
I'm not Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh. Michigan hired a coach, as if anybody didn't know that. People thought he was going to stay in the NFL. Michigan got their favorite son back. I like the Mike Riley hire at Nebraska. I thought Mike Riley did an excellent job at Oregon State. It's underfunded compared to Oregon. And, yeah, Pitt's looking for another coach to our friends out west.
Well, but Pat Narduzzi gets hired at Pitt. That does speak to stability of the Michigan State staff, which has been a hallmark for Mark D'Antonio. He's always kept his group together. That's the first time he really has to make a major adjustment.
Yeah, I think so. But again, it's like what we talked about with Bob Shoop and some of the other guys on the Penn State staff. I mean, it's not like you're not going to see guys staying in programs for 10, 15, 20 years. It just doesn't happen anymore. And the fact is, Pat Narduzzi's a good coach.
Yes.
He's got an opportunity at Pitt. I don't like Pitt. I never liked Pitt. I think, but for Penn State, Pitt needs to be good to kind of like keep them in the conversation for a variety of reasons. And hopefully does well there.
All right, let's talk. What do you think the impact of Jim Harbaugh can be? Because I think they've got a little more little distance to cover to get back than people realize.
I think the hire. Oh, I'm sorry, Jay. I thought the hire got the Big Ten off on the right foot to begin with, like going into bowl season, because there's always these questions: is the Big Ten a marquee conference anymore? Was on one of our previous shows, Corey Geiger asked, what kind of job is Michigan? Well, obviously Michigan's one of the top jobs if you just took one of the best coaches in the NFL, and yes, he was leaving San Francisco, but you stole him away from a lot of NFL teams. I think that speaks a lot to how much the Michigan brand is still worth and how much Michigan can improve upon where they've been the last couple of years.
Well, in divisional play, you have Michigan State playing well, Penn State on the rise, here they come, Ohio State, the Jim Harbaugh hiring at Michigan. If you're Jim Delaney, I don't think you can't wait to go out and talk to the TV networks about what your TV contract's going to be. I think this has ramifications beyond just competition on the field.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that for the conferences, the light is being shown on the Big Ten. You've got it's a great academic institution conference. It's not the SEC, thank God. The fact is that the Big Ten Network has done a tremendous job and are able to fund the programs now north of, what, $50 million? I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It's an exciting time for the Big Ten.
It is an exciting time, and I think they've hit stride at just the right time. Penn State, we talked just very quickly about guys leaving. Torrance Brown's going to be a guy to watch for then. Sickles, Schwann, guys like that. People forget about Brenneman coming back, too, with Jesse James leaving.
I like Adam Brenneman coming back. Of course, missed all of this year. He was devastated when I saw him over in Ireland. Another guy that I like too, Christian Hackenberg took a lot of hits. That offensive line, you're going to be looking for another backside tackle. Trace McSorley was a gamer when he was down in Virginia. Are they going to have a package for him next year that's a little bit of a curveball for these defenses?
Well, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think the finish to the season gives a lot of jump to the off-season conditioning program and into the spring, gives us a lot of jump as well as to what to talk about. We look forward to taking you through that and looking at the recruiting coming up down the road as well, because Letter of Intent Day will be the first Wednesday in February. With Todd Sadowski, Andrew, Trey, I'm Steve. Thanks for joining us here on the Blue White Tailgate Show.